something that you don't want on your person and on your being, because a adipocyte or a cytokine or whatever you want to call it, well, adipocytes and cytokines are different. The body fat, I need 2 AAAs for you. The body fat causes or creates its own type of inflammation. We used to think that a fat cell, was inert, meaning that it doesn't do anything but just sit there. It sits on your body, it causes issues, and that's not true. We know that that's not true now, because we know that the fat cell, let's do a little drawing here. Good morning, Teresa.
Babe, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I grabbed the wrong one.
If we were perfect, it wouldn't be any fun. So,
Are they double A's or triple A's?
triple A's. So, when we sit here, and I'm going to draw a fat cell in just a moment, because I want to be conscious of your time, everybody's time.
Sorry.
Changing batteries on the fly. Let's see, this is positive, this is negative, and Nurse Jessica is live. I'm going to give her the phone so I can talk. There we go, you're on camera. Just keep that and keep this with it so I can talk about facts. So we're looking at facts. First, we're going to talk about body fat. So if you have a cell inside your body, which this is fat, if you have a fat cell in your body, it sits there. And we used to think that it's inert. It didn't do anything. And what we know is that's actually not true.
That one's not showing up well.
We actually know that that's not true. And so the fat cell sits here and it sits on your body, and for the longest time we thought, yeah, it just is there. We now know that the fat cell secretes cytokines that affect other fat cells. So basically, this thing is trying to create its own environment so that it lives a happy life with all of its buddies. And this is where we get into trouble, because that causes a problem with having inflammation. So the more weight you have, the more you're inflamed and the harder it is to get rid of, simply because it doesn't want to go anywhere. And then you have brown fat inside your body, and this, like I said, is metabolically active. And when it's metabolically active, it does stuff and helps with thermogenesis, or burning calories. And babies have lots of brown fat. And we, as we get older, lose this metabolically active type of fat. And we don't want to lose that, or we want to stimulate that as much as we can. How do you stimulate this? Being cold, shivering, doing contrast baths, going from hot to cold to hot to cold. Those are the things that do that. And certain types of nutrition, so the way that you eat, also affects that. If you are eating sugars and refined carbs and stuff like that, you're going to make these. If you're eating good proteins, fatty fish, and Brussels sprouts, and whatever veggies that you like, you're going to develop this. And that's the way that we want to go. And so if there aren't any questions on body fat, we're going to go into nutritional fat. And we're going to talk about the differences and how this kind of stuff works. So when we start to look at nutritional fats, we start talking about saturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, saturated, polyunsaturated, and different types of fats. Like if you look at an MCT oil, that's a saturated fat. And I'm not going to go into the biochemistry about the carbon and how all the spaces are taken up, and that's what a saturated fat is, and the double bond makes it an unsaturated, and polyunsaturated has multiples. What we want to know is this. We have been fed for ages I don't want to say it's a lie, because at the time they thought that was the best science that they had, and for them it was their truth. But we were told that fats are bad, and fats cause cardiovascular disease. Let me just start by saying all of your hormones come from cholesterol. They come from these fats. Now, if you put bad fats in, then bad fats will not give you a high quality hormone, a high quality anything inside your body. So you want to have the best fats and the highest quality fats that you can get so that your body functions properly. And you can make your hormones, and you can make your thyroid hormones, and you can make your sex hormones, and you can make your adrenal hormone. You can make all of these hormones because that's what's needed. So,
Teresa and Dewey, can you hear him okay?
I hope so. I did a lot of sound testing. So, let's talk about, let's talk about what are bad fats. Nurse Jess, what's a bad fat? Just
Like
throw one out.
food that you eat?
Yeah.
Hydrogenated.
So margarine. How have these things all died?
Oh, thanks, Teresa. Appreciate it. She can hear you fine.
Good. I don't know how these things have all died, but I'm having serious marker issues. So let's say margarine.
Margarine isn't real. Don't eat it. Don't buy it. 88 cents is not worth your health.
Yeah, no.
Buy the good stuff.
Margarine doesn't go into the body and serve any purpose. I've heard that it's one molecule away from plastic and whatever else. Anecdotally from my own family, my mom, because she was trying to be health conscious and everything else, for a long time used margarine, and my mother died from cardiovascular disease. You've heard me say it over and over, abdominal aortic aneurysm. So when you are eating margarine, and that goes into the body doesn't have polyunsaturated fats or saturated fats to do anything with. So it can't make your hormones, and it can't do these things. So in the body, what happens?
It scars your blood vessels and it makes plaque and you'll die. Don't eat it.
But also what happens is your liver makes, I've heard estimates anywhere from 85 to 90% of your cholesterol. And so when we talk about that, that's how important these molecules are in your body. And so if you're making 85 to 90% of your cholesterol, and you're not giving your body the raw components it needs to make good cholesterol, it's going to do what it can. And so it starts to kick out these small particles. And these small particles are very atherosclerotic. The older you get, the longer you've had insulin working on you, the more you can have these atherosclerotic plaques if your diet isn't on spot, if you're not getting exercise, if you're not sleeping well, if you have a stressful relationship with your family and friends. Those things all release cortisol, which raises blood sugar, and we've talked about that, which also increases insulin. And insulin goes through and fries these things. You can think of insulin as a flamethrower, and it is frying your fats, making your fats not able to be used. And what do? They float around in the bloodstream. This is an oversimplification. They float around in the bloodstream and they get inside the cell wall. So margarine.
Well, tell them why. Because that inner layer of the blood vessel is only 1 cell thick. It gets inflamed. These are small. They go between the cells. They get under the cells. They push the cell up, and now you've got a plaque growing. But good fats heal that.
Actually, the Ornish diet, which is a vegan-based diet, has been shown to reverse atherosclerosis. So if anybody has heavy plaquing and had heavy things like that, I would highly recommend looking into the Ornish diet.
And anybody that gets heart stents or blockages in their heart have plaques.
Yep. And so when you look at the blood vessel, please write. Thank you. In here is all your blood and fluids, and you actually have particles going through here, your VLDLs, your LDLs, your LP little a, all of those wonderful components of your blood and fats and things like that. But the LP little a, if it's small enough, can weasel its way into here. And that's when we start to have bad news. Because when the LP little a, or the bad, tiny, hard atherosclerotic plaques get in there, the body knows that it's not supposed to be there. So the immune system says, hey, you're not supposed to be there. So we're going to send out the soldiers. And they send out a dude called a macrophage. A little bit of etymology, tip of the hat to Mom. Macro, large, big. Phage, to eat. So it sends out a big eater. Think of it like Pac-Man. So Pac-Man comes in here and starts to digest that bit right there. And when he digests that bit right there and he dies, the body says, okay, his job is done. And then it sends in another cell and it creates what is called a bone cell. So now the macrophage has done his job and he has walled this off and eaten it, but he's still large. His mass still stays there, and you start to develop, as Dr. Attia said, a pimple inside the cell wall. And that foam cell makes that pimple get larger, and then things start to collect around here. And as we know, over time, so atherosclerosis, dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, cardiovascular disease of every type, diabetes, all of these things are diseases of aging and time. And this starts to swell, and over time it gets larger and larger and larger until it occludes that, or it breaks off and then you have a plaque.
And then you get a stroke if it goes to your brain.
Yep, stroke in the brain, heart attack,
Pulmonary embolism,
get
DVTs.
ischemias of different types. You can't feel your toes, feet, and things of that nature with ischemias and stuff like that. So other oils that do not give us the parts that we need are canola, corn, soybean. These are all bad oils. I see things, I read literature where grapeseed oil is good one time and then it's not good next. I think you might be kind of safe if you get the cold pressed, verified grapeseed. But when you're looking at canola, corn, and soybean, these are all products of industry. And they had all these leftovers, and Americans, if we are nothing else, we are very industrious. And so what we ended up having were all these leftovers, and they figured out, hey, you know what? You can actually kind of cook with this stuff. And what was the first thing that came out that was white, that everybody loved, that was kind of plasticky, that wasn't real? Was that Crisco? Is Crisco?
Crisco is a
artificial?
lard, or like a lard product. It's like a shortening.
Well, so shortening and margarine came out of that process, and they processed that with hexane, which is not good for
And then they came up with the oleo that was supposed to just pass right through.
And so when we, oh yeah, Olestra. That, my nephew had a bout with Olestra. Sorry, the 12-year-old, that's just funny. So canola, corn, and soybean are highly processed things. Even olive oil, which is great for you, is processed, but you want it to be a cold pressed process.
You really want it to be made outside of the United States in high quality, because they sneak all this stuff in as fillers.
Even in Italy, they have people that sneak in stupid stuff, but you're better off, or you have a better chance of getting a good fat if it comes elsewhere than the United States. So these vegetable oils are bad, and they do, when they come in, they're so fragile. What makes them bad is they're very fragile, and we like to cook with them. So when you're cooking with them, you're taking them above their smoke point, and that starts to break them down. And when you break these things down, they become what are known as, so we add heat, I really don't know if it's the whiteboard or the markers. So we add heat, and that brings all of these to the point that they begin to make what are known as reactive oxygen species. Reactive oxygen species, we're bringing it around full circle. Reactive oxygen species are the species that cause you to have the problems with the Lp(a) and the problems with the number of these fats. So most of us get a test known as a lipid panel. And we all know the lipid panel, because the lipid panel is when you get to figure out whether or not you're going to go on a statin or not. And so the lipid panel that we all get typically has triglycerides, it typically has HDLs and LDL. If I remember my history properly, this test was actually invented in the 1950s. And I could be wrong. Wouldn't be the first time, won't be the last. But these three things, this is a very old test, and it is the standard of care, but this test does not give you a whole lot of information. I guess you could call it the first step in knowing if you might have a problem or not. There is a newer test called an NMR, and that is a nuclear magnetic resonance test. And in this, they start to look at what types of HDLs do you have? What's the size and how many? It looks at the LDLs, and once again, it tells you the size and how many, and that's what's important. What is the size of the LDL? Because if it's large, remember our vein, artery, if it's too large, it can't get between the two spots. And if it's small, it digs in there and causes that arterial sclerosis. The NMR typically comes with what is known as an IR. That means it's an insulin resistance rating. And so if you have a very simple diet that composed of refined carbs, and with refined carbs, think pasta, think bread, think, what else? Refined carbs. Those are the biggies in America. Chips, cookies, crackers. All of these things are made from refined flour, and they're still doing some studies on that because they don't know if it's the flour itself. And I used to be very adamant about, the dwarf wheat came in, and when the dwarf wheat came in, it's more glutinous and it does evil things to us, and then it's harvested with glyphosate and blah, blah, blah. As recently as last week, I was listening to some research, and they said, well, we tried to standardize for that stuff, and the gluten in those things isn't that much more. So they don't know if it's actually the gluten, or because we have to mass produce these things so much and in such large quantities that it requires all these petroleum inputs. Remember when I was talking about vegetable oil and the hexane? Once again, we have to put a lot of petrochemical inputs into this, into that process to make those things, which adds lots of burden to the body. Your microbiome can't handle it all. It gets overwhelmed. Your insulin gets overwhelmed. Pastas, breads, chips, cookies, and crackers go into the body and basically get turned right to glucose. And one mechanism for raising your cholesterol and your triglycerides and things like that is not giving your body a break and having the body go into what is called autophagy and apoptosis. These are when your body, autophagy is a self-eating, and an apoptosis is a cellular destruction, which are our body's cleanup mechanisms. So if you're eating these types of things, your body never gets a break. And the next thing that's bad about those is a lot of them contain high fructose corn syrup. Think of that like rocket fuel. So what that does is it hits the body and it just explodes and then it leaves. And in this time right here, I'm going to get a little deep. Fructose itself actually doesn't stimulate insulin. But when you put fructose and high fructose corn syrup in the presence of gluten, wheat, pasta, things like that, that will stimulate insulin. So the insulin is stimulated. Insulin is a very slow-acting hormone. Insulin lasts about 3 hours in the body. The fructose lasts, high fructose corn syrup lasts about 15 minutes. But let's say fructose, let's give it 30 minutes. It's in and out, leaving insulin to create havoc inside the body, which is exactly what it does. And you can figure out if you're starting to get insulin resistant by symptoms, simple symptoms. Do you get tired after a meal? Do you get hungry 30 minutes after a meal? get hangry? Do you have hypoglycemic events? Let's get one thing very straight very quickly. Unless you have a trauma, unless you have seriously aberrant genetics, your body wants to come back to what is known as homeostasis. Your body wants to come back to a normal, healthy, healing place. Hypoglycemic events don't happen. If you were in the wild and existing off of the land and you were metabolically flexible, you would not have a hypoglycemic event until probably you were ready to die. And that's not going to happen in 12 hours, it's not going to happen in 24, and it's probably not going to happen in 48 as long as you can get water. But these are signs that you are becoming insulin resistant. And when insulin remains in the bloodstream, like I said, it creates all kinds of havoc. Cardiovascular disease, oxidizes fats, causes other problems. And when this happens, your body raises cholesterol levels. Yes, ma'am.
Tell them what the body looks like of somebody that has insulin resistance.
So a phenotype. This is an expression of this. So what is the phenotype of somebody who is insulin resistant, having problems with this type of stuff, probably is having problems with, if you're having problems with cholesterol and your triglycerides are high and you're oxidizing things and you're having thyroid events and gosh, I can just go on. It's all related. I mean, it is all related. For men, actually, for men, this is leftover insulin resistance. I am metabolically flexible. I can go without food for several days and I don't have problems. I don't get hangry. I don't get whatever. You know,
I still think he looks great.
I'm still working on it. 10 years ago, I didn't know this, but your men get round, abdominal obesity, your
beer gut.
Yeah. There's a great Far Side comic with a deer or with a bear and his belly's way out here and looks at his buddy and goes, deer gut. So, hip to waist ratio.
I think so too, Teresa.
So, hip to waist ratio should be, if I remember right, for males, should be about 0.8. Women start to get that abdominal obesity and men start to get, apple shaped. Women get pear shaped. And their hip
thank you.
to waist ratio should be less than 1. So if they say 0.9, guys, I forget exactly what it is. 0.5
Well,
to
I'm
0.9.
kind of not that. I'm not like that. I'm just straight down. I got work to do, but I've always been straight down. I don't have a little waist, so.
But the thing is
But that apple body where they get real thick around the middle.
But the thing about this is it starts to point out to us that, hey, you may have an issue.
Yeah.
And that's when you need to really start digging into it. And don't accept the triglycerides, HDLs, and LDLs. And you know, your A1C is blah, blah, blah. Don't just accept that. You've got to know you got to go into the ratio.
Well, I think they're told a lot of times, oh, you're just getting older, it's your hormones, it's this, it's that.
And that's very true.
Yeah, it is.
You are getting older, and it is your hormones, but you got to put good stuff in
To get,
so you get.
yeah.
Would you rather have? And I'm not knocking anybody.
No,
or
it's
anything.
this should not be an expected part of aging.
No. And so when we discuss this and we think about this, you got to start to think about quality. I'm a car guy, and I love all kinds of different stuffs and exotics and things like that.
I like old stuff.
What would I rather have? Would I rather have a
Mustang.
1970s Yugo or a Mercedes or a Mustang? I would much rather go with the higher quality vehicle than the Yugo, which I will probably end up push starting multiple times. That, it's the same way for women. What's something for women? Give me would you rather have a low quality item?
Trying to get that's just preference of the person.
I understand. Give me something.
I'd rather have a Coach bag
Okay.
than another bag, but I will keep that Coach bag forever. But that's just me. Shoes, I don't know, diamonds.
Whoever we all have our thing. So what is it? Would you rather have a Matthews bow or a Hoyt? Would you rather you want high quality? Actually, that's not a good.
Yeah, that's not necessarily true, but you want what you want. So
your
whatever it is
Matthews
that
and
you
your
want.
Hoyts are on the same. Matthews or a rinky-dink Walmart bow. Those are just the comparisons.
Yeah, Teresa loves diamonds.
Diamonds, gotcha.
I do too, Teresa.
So would you rather have a manufactured diamond or a real diamond? I don't know if there's a quality issue with those or not. But that's the thing that you have to look at and you have to think about. And so it's not hard to start to put good, high quality inputs in. You have to look a little bit. You have to change you definitely want to look at your pantry and change your pantry around and only put in good, high quality stuff in your pantry so that when you go to the pantry,
Teresa.
it's a safe place. That's what has to happen. And if you don't have your house being a safe place, where in the world will you have a safe place? So here are my tests, and we're actually going to go over these a little bit. And so this is where I started, and this is my journey, and I did a little bit of this the other day. We look at this, and in October of 18, the typical control for an American is 4.8. I was paleo at this time. So I'm eating, steaks and proteins, and I'm pretty high on the steaks and the proteins. And I am watching my carbs and watching my fats. And we see that I am just barely better than the typical American. And the target is 9%. Think of omega-3s as anti-inflammatory. These are great. Omega-6s are essential, but they are very pro-inflammatory. And so we have our markers here. We want these at greater than 50%. We want the omega-6s at less than 50%. And as you can tell, I am upside down. Here are your different types. The great thing about this is the body, remember when I was talking about homeostasis, and falling apart is not what the body is designed to do. What we find out is I didn't change anything here other than I added
Me, 3 days later.
That was 11 days later.
Oh, I was looking at this.
So I added 2 tablespoons.
At least we know you know your anniversary. That's good.
2 tablespoons of a high concentrate fish oil. And now I'm human, and we're going to go through this. But here's the mortality graph and how heart disease and the highly unsaturated fatty acids correlate. The farther up here we are, the worse we are, the more we die, and the more likely we are to die from some form of heart disease. So then we start to look at this, and there's the USA, here's Quebec, and here's me. And I'm like, that's not good enough. I have family that depends on me still, and I'm just not done doing what God needs me to do. So I want to go this way. So I added the 2 tablespoons. I am square in the middle of the deficiency risk. So then, it's kind of funny. This line, everywhere where I'm below the line, I'm supposed to be above the line. Everywhere where I'm above the line, I'm supposed to be below the line. Once again, just opposite, topsy-turvy of where I should be. Did not change anything, added the 2 tablespoons of fish oil, and here we start to get into the NMR. And we're looking at my profile. And so I am being very conscious about being paleo, and I have I'm eating lots of protein. The thing you have to remember is protein in large amounts does stimulate insulin. And so I'm eating huge quantities of protein, and so I am stimulating insulin. And what we start to see here are my lipid profile, and look at my total cholesterol. Total cholesterol, 329. My medical friends are now cringing because they say, right now, you need to be on a statin. But I believe in what I do. At the time, didn't know how to change things. And so I'm like, okay, I got to figure this out, because my numbers and size of my particles are way out of range. And that's from years of alcohol, Twizzlers, fast food. That was just my life. So then, let's go to the next page, please. I need like that little dinger, turn the page. So then they go in and they start to tell you about how these things associate with cardiovascular risk. So nothing in humans is quick. We aren't designed to change quick. We aren't designed to, unless we have an accident or something like that. So I've added the 2 tablespoons of the omega-3 fatty acids. And now here I am from 10 to 6. So 8 months later, I now am at a 11.1. The typical is 4.8. We are now greater than 9%. Fabulous. My omega-3 fatty acids are so very close to being that 50-50 split, which we know is anti-inflammatory. So because I see that I am changing this, I am not so worried about this other stuff because I'm still kind of young. My family has longevity. We don't have heart attacks at 40 and 50 years of age, although I do have a sibling that had a stroke in his 50s. So, but I see that I am changing this. I am actively on this. And I see that it is good. And now I'm about to cross the line. Being me and being human, I figure, hey, I'm good. So I take my foot off the gas a little bit. So now we go from 6/20 of 19 to about a year later. And I am following I'm not. I fell off the wagon. The truth be told, I still take my omega-3 fatty acids. But look at this. My cholesterol still dropped. And my Lp(a) particle number is still too high. And the size is still off. But I'm starting to get a better profile. of what I want to see. Now, personal choice, I did not see a medical doctor. If you are my patient, we would be discussing this very heavily with a medical doctor, because we don't want you to be taking risks that you're not aware of. Then we start to see my LDL or my HDL size is low, my VLDLs, small particles, they're all still off. And I need to still correct those and work on those. So I redouble my efforts. Here's my omega-3 test. At this time, I think I dropped off and I was only taking 1 tablespoon 2 to 3 times a week. And look at how much my stuff dropped off. My content is still greater than 9. The thing that I do like about this is my omega-3s are almost at 50. So even though I dropped back down, I didn't lose the benefit of having omega-3s in my system at a better ratio. But I can still do better. I'm still very close to the median line here. I fell back a little bit. So now we do more research, we do reading, and I find out that, hey, your microbiome, A, affects your blood sugar, A, affects your insulin, B, affects your metabolism, C is what produces most of your enzymes, and guess what your microbiome wants? What's your microbiome want? What's it eat?
It wants diversity and fiber and
It wants
good
fiber. I am not talking about Metamucil, and I am not talking about whatever they put on the shelves at Walmart and wherever else. You want fiber out of vegetables. Another thing that I'm trying to still knock down my my cholesterol with is beans. I did not add very many beans into this, but my cholesterol went back up. And I didn't like that, and I really didn't understand it. But at the time, on the weekends, I had, like I said, taken my foot off the gas, was drinking alcohol a little more frequently. I'd have a beer or two on some weekends, and I just really can't do that. I'm gluten sensitive. I know I am, and yet I still do. I wasn't getting drunk. I wasn't drinking more than 2. But that saying that everything in moderation is okay, not necessarily on some things. You really can't take cyanide and turn out okay. So here we're looking at the particle number still high, particle size is still off, and the total cholesterol is high. So now I come to Jessica and I'm like, okay, I need help. And this is the way that we need to cook. This is what we need to eat. And it's not bad. I mean, we switched more to fish. We switched more to vegetables. And we got rid of some of our decadent treats and pulled in healthier treats.
and we don't eat a lot of dairy anymore.
Yeah, I pretty much eliminated dairy, and I love cheese. If you look at my glucose plus A1C plus insulin plus C-reactive protein, see, my blood sugars really don't get bad. 89 is higher than I want. I want it to be at a high of 85 tops. We didn't get the A1C. My testosterone looks great. So all of that's good. Add in the exercise a little bit more. Change the diet, tweak it a little bit more. And this is the latest one. And I got it on the 17th. And we see that the particle number dropped, and that's what I want to see. We see that this is still high, but it's dropped, and that's what I like to see. But my LDL size is large now.
So what that means is that little bitty
They're not getting
molecule
into
that
the
got
veins.
between the cells of the vein is fluffy now, so it's too big to go.
Yes,
there.
it's fluffier, so it's not going to get in there, and it's not going to kill me. So, well, now the old stuff may. I'm not willing to go to the Ornish diet. So one thing to drop this are sterols. And what are foods high in sterols? And conversely enough, high in fiber. So now I'm trying to get more beans in, and we're going to see how that changes my blood work in about 6 months. That's the thing. When you make a change with this, you then see it through. When you see my cholesterol at 309, I am not advocating somebody let their cholesterol get that high. I can't, because I don't know what you're doing. You really need to watch that. But you then need to know your sizes, you need to know your insulin, you need to know all that other stuff, because there are lots of studies out there that say people with higher cholesterol and a good profile through here they live longer. They have less cardiovascular disease and less death, which kind of makes sense, because if you have the good profile and you're putting high quality inputs in, your hormones will be better. And since this test to this test, what I have added was, I was just thinking about exercise. I don't have my back pain. I had a bicycle wreck quite a few years ago, and I had always had just a pain in the hip. And now these things aren't as inflammatory. So when I do something stupid, I don't hurt. Ask Jessica, I just don't complain. And there's a reason for it. And honestly, whatever your belief system is, whether you have a belief in God or higher power, whatever that is, whatever designed us and allows us to be, and they designed an incredible system. And don't forget about the microbiome. You are a combination of lots of bacteria, viri, and human cells. So think about this. Somewhere in history, we had two cells that were not the same. We had a basically plant cell that said, hey, I will hook up with you and I will become your energy producer. You have to feed me and shelter me. So I don't know about you, but I've never been able to have a discussion with a cell and make that happen. So higher power, God, whatever the case may be, made that happen. And now, evolutionarily, this relationship has continued on. And so that's why when you take an antibiotic, it'll throw off your lipids, it'll throw off your sugars, it does all kinds of stuff, and it kills your little gut buddies. So, and you want those guys. I just sent off my microbiome test, and I just sent off another omega-3 test. We'll see how they turn out. With that being said, I have 5 minutes until I have a conference call. I do appreciate the people on the line. If you have any questions, please. I love doing this stuff. Ask Jessica. It irritates her because I answer questions all the time. And I am happy to do that. Just as she's a nurse and she doesn't like it eating into personal time, but she also understands that it helps. And it helps a lot of people. And that's what we're all here for. We're here to help each other. Because, if I die owning Ferraris and cars and stuff like that, nobody knows that stuff was mine. I'm just dead and that stuff goes to the next person.
Yeah, I don't care about that stuff. I like time.
But if I change somebody's health, and I help them that way, and then they help their family, well, that's a change that matters. And that's what we're about at Integrated Health of Indiana. So thank you. Ask any questions you want. I have last week's video to post, and I need to post this video. Hopefully I'll get that done today. Y'all be careful and be healthy.
Bye, guys. We'll see.
Thank you for taking this time to look into the health of you and your loved ones. This broadcast does not constitute a doctor-patient relationship. It is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not a replacement or substitute for care. If you are having issues, please seek a qualified professional trained in functional medicine. We would be happy to be of assistance with both in-person and virtual consultations. Thank you.